let's bring on Brian Almon here joining us this morning. Brian, we're going to get into this here today. Welcome to the program. We're anticipating this to be the final week of the session. There are bills that are, like I said, the House has been flying through some bills this morning. The Senate was at ease the last time I checked. But I wanted to kind of get your perspective on bills that have gone through, bills that have failed, bills that are stalled, and where you think we're going. I have my list here. It's all highlighted with where things are. But if there's some place you'd rather start, I want to kick it over to you, sir.
Oh, hello, Matt. Thanks for having me here. Once again, it's been a great program this year, keeping people informed about what's going on in the session. I think, for too long and for too many people, the session, it's just this thing that happens, and you might hear one or two things if you open up the newspaper or turn on the evening news, but it's not really that important. But I think the last few years have proven that it is important, especially as, we have, I think, a left-wing agenda throughout the country that is moving to rapidly transform our country. And you've got conservatives trying to stand up and stop that, and others who are saying it's not really happening. And our state legislatures are at the front lines of that. So what happens here really, really makes a difference, much more than, it's easy to get caught up in the national news, who's the president, who's running, who's the Speaker of the House this week. But really that has a much less impact on your life than what happens in the Capitol in Boise. So I think it's good that people are starting to pay attention. I think programs like yours are great, and I'm trying to do my best to keep people informed. I started at the beginning of the session this thing I called the session snapshot over at the Gem State Chronicle. I was keeping track of all the bills, showing you where they are, doing a write-up. If I watched the committee, I'd write up exactly what was happening. If you go up to the top, there's a link to it. Eventually, I just ran out of time. Right around the beginning of March, every committee had about 10 different RSs that were being introduced all at the same time for several days at a time. And there were just too many bills. So if I ever do this again, I'm going to need a team of interns to keep up on it. But it has been interesting. And so you can see now with the graphics, which bills have been killed. They have the little red dot. Which ones have been signed. They're fully green across the board. And which ones are stuck. The ones that, have, their green lines are about halfway there. They're stuck in a committee or on the floor. And anything that's still stuck in committee right now, I assume, is going to die because leadership obviously didn't want it to go through. Ron Nate over at the Freedom Foundation wrote an article just this week looking at all the bills that Senator Jim Guthrie, the chairman of Senate State Affairs, has blocked so far. And there's like a dozen different bills that are sitting in his drawer in Senate State Affairs that simply haven't gotten a hearing. And some of them are okay bills. Some of them are great bills, like Brian Lenny's DEI bill. And they're just stuck there. I remember 2 years ago when I first started paying attention to the legislature, the chairman of Senate State Affairs then was Senator Patty Ann Lodge. And she was doing the same thing. She would stuff bills in her drawer, and even good stuff that came from the House Bill 666, removing the exception that allows librarians and teachers to give obscene materials to children. That passed the House overwhelmingly, and then it got stuck in her drawer. Even people like Julie Yamamoto and Lori McCann from House Education, they voted for that, which tells me that they probably knew that the fix was in, that it was never going to go anywhere in the Senate. So you can see how these committee chairs use their power to put their thumbs on the scales here during the session.
Yeah, Brian, let me stop you there real quick, because you're exactly right, and that is a point I definitely want to get to about the power that these committee chairs hold, for better or for worse. Because when you look at the House side, you could say, well, Brent Crane, the chairman of the House State Affairs Committee, is holding some bad bills that we don't like. But for better or for worse, it's a power that is very that it's not going anywhere. So we can't talk about that in a moment, but I want to go back to to the Senate State Affairs, because that's exactly the biggest problem in Idaho right now. And so you pointed out a couple of bills that are starting on the Senate and haven't crossed over. But how about some of the great bills that have crossed over from the House, Brian? I mean, we're looking at bills like the mask mandate bill, the concealed weapons on school property bill. These bills passed the House with a great majority, and and sit in the Senate State Affairs Committee. Ballot harvesting prohibited. The traditional values month. That's just a resolution. That's not even a law. I mean, these things are not even getting a hearing. And there might be a couple in here that did get a hearing, but then they got killed. They said they weren't going to pass them in the Senate, even though they passed overwhelmingly in the House. What sticks out to you from the House side that is sitting in Senate State Affairs that you think we should be focused on, or if there's any last minute push here in this final week?
Let's see. Well, there's Representative Young's bill defining male and female seems pretty straightforward. The Democrats hate it, but is that a reason for the Republican chairman of the Senate State Affairs to hold it and not let it go through? So sometimes it seems, you've got, call them extremes, just the margins, the most conservative people on the right and the most liberal people on the left. Is probably the Idaho Freedom Caucus Republicans on the right and the Democrats on the left. And it seems like some of these committee chairs and these people in leadership, they're more worried about what the leftists think of them than what the conservatives think of them. And it tells you, I think, where some of their loyalties lie. I'm trying to find some of them over here.
Well, I've got a few. House, like I said, House Bill 415, the enhanced carry permit holders who work on schools would be allowed to carry weapons. Guthrie tried to have a substitute bill on that, which was denied. And so that they know that there is demand for this. The NRA was behind this bill. So that bill is not going anywhere soon, it doesn't seem like. The compelled speech, House Bill 538, that might get a hearing this week, but that's a huge issue. That's a huge First Amendment issue. Have you heard any rumblings about any of these bills, like this compelled speech one, 538?
I haven't heard anything. It's just been stuck in there, and that's another one where the Democrats really hate it. And for some reason, I don't know. Maybe there are enough moderate Republicans out there who really want to vote against this, but they're afraid of what it would look like to their constituents to go home to Eastern Idaho and tell their voters that yes, I protected the right of people to demand to be called by different pronouns, and they don't want to have to do that. So, perhaps Chairman Guthrie's just doing them all a favor by not letting it see the light of day.
I was at an event last night. I spoke with some young folks who they gather monthly for political purposes to discuss politics, to share stories of in their they're all like-minded young folks that gather. And I was asked to come in and speak last night, and one of the people there, she was 15 years old, and she was talking about at her high school that 5 teachers, and this is just her reporting, this 15-year-old's reporting, that 5 teachers have left or quit their jobs or have moved their jobs, whatever, something, because they are being forced to use pronouns that they don't believe in, or they're forced to. And I'm not just saying calling a girl a boy or a boy a girl, but calling somebody a cat. I mean, she was talking about this furry that brings a litter box to school. And I know this is an urban legend, that there's litter boxes in schools. And I never considered the fact that maybe the students themselves would bring their own litter boxes, that schools weren't supplying them. But this is all, again, this is from a 15-year-old's mouth. And I told her, I said, I need proof. I need, so she's got to find a way to do that. So she's now it's public. It's on record. That being said, though, these are a real problem, and they affect real people's lives, and they really upset the apple cart when it comes to having a civil society where we're being crazed with our minds to shift all of the rules of grammar in order to satisfy somebody's feelings. And so that, to me, that bill is extremely important. Why can't these things get a hearing, Brian? I mean, you've been looking at the state across the board when it comes to how the factions are forming, and these Main Street caucus people seem to just be deferring to this radical left ideology that the Democrats permeate throughout the Capitol.
Well, what I think is happening from a very big picture level is you have a lot of us thought that they would try and go more conservative this year since it's an election year. And that's always what Republicans try to do, move to the right for the primary in an election year and then go back to business as usual. But this year, they haven't really done that. They've gone the other direction. And so I think what's happened is that I think the so-called Main Street caucus, the moderate Republicans, the liberal Republicans, they saw the power, the growing power of the Idaho Freedom Caucus that was coalescing around more conservative principles and working as a bloc to try and promote those principles. And so I think, this is just my speculation, I think that the Main Street Caucus made some sort of secret deal, whether spoken or unspoken, with the Democrats. Because there's not many Democrats in the legislature. There's, 8 in the Senate and 11 in the House. But you take that number, add it to the Main Street Caucus, and you've got a pretty sizable chunk. And I think there has been some vote trading going on. You saw all the Republicans, all the Main Street Republicans line up behind Senator Wintrow's bill to force insurance providers to carry 6 or to reimburse 6 months of contraception. They were all too happy to do that. And then some of the Democrats have flipped and supported some, of the Main Street Caucus bill. So I think there's a secret alliance there, a kind of a Molotov-Ribbentrop pact, if you want to go there, between the left-wing Republicans and the Democrats to shut out the conservative Republicans. It's not about the issues; it's about maintaining their power, and this is a path they see forward that, to keep their power in the legislature.
Well, and these people need to be called out for it, and I thank you for doing your part in calling people out for it. We see it, we see that happening throughout some of the chatter out on social media and stuff. But so I hope we can keep that stuff up. Okay, a couple other important bills that I think folks should know about that appear to be stalled. One of them is House Bill 525, which is in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. If you pull that one up, that deals with the health boards, limiting the health boards, and I believe that got voted down in committee.
Yes, I was in the room for that one.
Yeah, talk to us about that, and because this is again, it passed in the House. What's going on?
Yeah, it passed almost on a party line. Only one Republican voted against it. A couple of Republicans voted against it in the House. Dustin Manwaring, Clay Handy, but it came over to the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, and Senator Brian Lenny presented it, and they shut it down. Abby Lee voted against it and debated against it. I think that there was probably, this is actually the incident that inspired me to write the article about how politics is more like Mean Girls than anything else, because I think there's just some personal animosity toward Brian Lenny from fellow senators. And so they saw an opportunity to kill a bill he was carrying, and so they did it. And in the meantime, it helped solidify that alliance, potential alliance.
Despicable. Despicable, Brian. Come on. Yep. I mean, we're talking about a bill that passed, and you're right. It passed 58-12 in the House. And the only two Republicans that voted for it were Clay Handy and Dustin Manwaring, just confirming. Clay Handy and Dustin Manwaring. And then it goes to a completely Republican-controlled committee. Completely controlled Republican committee. Where it gets, you're saying it dies most likely because people don't like Brian Lenny.
Yep. And Senator Abby Lee joined with the Democrats, Melissa Wintrow and Ron Taylor, to vote no.
Right. Unbelievable.
And remember, Senator Lee is not running for re-election, so I think she's I think she's either just on a kind of a revenge tour, or she's just showing her true colors. If you check her, last I checked, her Freedom Index score was something like 25%, something ridiculously low for a Republican. So now that she doesn't have to go back to her voters in District 9 and say, ask for their vote, she's, basically caucusing with the Democrats almost.
Yeah, she can do whatever she wants. And just to clarify, all that bill did was say that health districts should the language in the law would be to remove the word all and substitute it with reasonable and necessary, right? It was remove all, replace with reasonable and necessary when it comes to making recommendations on health restrictions on the public. So things like mask mandates or social distancing or stay home or whatever happened during COVID that was completely outrageous. All this bill wanted to do was to say to the health districts, you can't just say all. You can't do all things. You can do reasonable things. And then let them interpret what that is, and then we'll take it from there. But to just say all is what got us in the mess last time. So it was a reasonable bill.
Yeah, and that's why I think there must have been maybe some personal animosity there. But there's a lot of what seem to be reasonable bills that are being killed or being just stuffed in the drawer. Speaking of mask mandates, there's Senator Lee sitting down at 25%. Hanging out with the Democrats. She's flanked by 2 Democrats there.
Right. Incredible. That's the Idaho Freedom Foundation's Freedom Index. Well, they do 3 different measurements now. They do the education, freedom, and spending, and that's pretty lousy when it comes to freedom.
The education index there, that can be a bit of an outlier just because they've only put a handful of bills on the education index. So it's I don't think it's as valuable as the other 2 indices because there might be only 2 bills that are on it. So you vote for one and vote against the other and whatever. But you see her scores are pretty low. She's perhaps returning to her foundational principles there. Hopefully that seat gets an upgrade. But you mentioned mask mandates. A bill to ban cities from imposing mask mandates or any courthouses or any other government office. It passed the House 46-24, and it's sitting in Jim Guthrie's drawer. It's not getting a hearing, and that's that really is the most frustrating thing because all these committee chairs, they're appointed by the pro tem, and I think the lieutenant governor gives some input. I don't know exactly what the balance there is, but they're appointed by leadership, and leadership is voted on by the body. So, really what you need is, you need to come back next year with enough conservative senators that they can elect new leadership who can then put in committee chairs who aren't going to just put things in their drawers to keep good legislation from going through. I mean, it's one thing if it's a bill that was just introduced, say, on the Senate side, and maybe the chair doesn't think it's ready or doesn't think it's going to pass. That's one thing. But if it comes from the other chamber and it passed, that's where I think, there ought to be a rule that says if it already passed the other chamber, then it has to at least have a hearing in the committee. Maybe it fails the committee. Maybe the committee votes it down. That's
sure.
Fine, but at least give it a public hearing.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. Okay, we've added music to our programming here, so that if you've heard that, don't get distracted by it. That just means we're going to go to a quick break. Brian, can you stick around for another segment?
Sure.
Okay, great. All right, folks, we'll be right back after this.
Spending this money surplus, which is not a surplus; it's an overcharging of the taxpayer.